She gave a scared girl a free cocoa and got fired on the spot. A week later, she was speaking on TEDx while investors pulled out of the coffee chain. What happened next turned her into the face of a national movement. It was one of those Mondays, the kind where the sky looked like it hadn't slept and the rain felt personal, like the universe just needed to spit on someone. The streets hissed under car tires, and inside the worn little cafe Maple and Steam, the warm hum of espresso machines offered the only mercy. The bell above the front door jingled, not cheerful, not friendly, just tired. Joan turned instinctively. 24, broke, overcaffeinated, and too damn decent for the job, she was juggling college, bills, and the kind of customers who thought tipping and smiles was enough. She was halfway through wiping down the counter when she saw her, a soaked teenage girl, no older than 13, dripping water onto the floor, her arms clenched around her stomach like she was trying not to come apart. Joan didn't ask anything, didn't need to. She'd seen that look, not the bad grade teenage drama kind, but the my world's falling apart and nobody sees me kind. The girl mumbled through hiccuped breaths. My dad, he's in the hospital. I couldn't get home. Joan just nodded, slid a steaming cocoa across the counter like it was a lifeline, added a warm sandwich without a word. No charge, she said softly. No explanation, no receipt, just kindness. The girl sat in the corner for 15 quiet minutes, staring at her drink like it might hold her together. Then she left, her boots squishing with every step, but her shoulders a little straighter than before. Joan let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. And that's when the storm actually hit. From the back office came the click-click of heels, sharp, rehearsed, and headed straight for trouble. Chloe, the shift manager, mid-30s, corporate clone, a walking HR policy with zero empathy and an MBA in condescension. She looked like someone who'd rehearsed their own surprise party. Chloe tapped the monitor behind the register with a manicured nail like she was launching a missile. You didn't ring it up. Joan blinked. What? The cocoa, the sandwich. You didn't scan the order. She was a kid. She was crying. She couldn't breathe. Chloe crossed her arms like that somehow made her taller. That's not our problem. We have policies, budgets. You're not paid to be a social worker. Joan laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was unbelievable. She was alone. She was having a panic attack. What exactly would you have done? Offered her a coupon? Chloe didn't blink. You broke protocol. That means termination. Effective immediately. Joan stood there, apron still on, fists clenched so tight her nails dug half moons into her palms. The cocoa had cost the company maybe $3.75. Her job, apparently, wasn't worth that much compassion. She stared at Chloe, who already turned away. Mission accomplished. Fired for kindness. Expelled from the system for having a heart. And right then, something shifted. Not rage, not sadness. Something colder, something stronger. Joan untied her apron, folded it in perfect silence, and placed it neatly on the counter. Chloe didn't even look back. But Joan wasn't done. Not by a long shot. To be continued. What happened next changed everything. You won't want to miss how Joan flipped the script on corporate cruelty. Joan walked home in the same rain the girl had trudged through. Only now, it didn't feel poetic. It felt punishing. Her sneakers squelched like they were mocking her with every step. The coffee shop's apron, still balled up in her backpack, weighed 10 times heavier than it should have. Maybe because it wasn't just fabric anymore. It was the last piece of a job that turned on her for doing the right thing. She felt soaked, yes, but also bruised in ways that didn't show up on skin. All this over $7 damn. $7 and a cup of hot cocoa. The price of being human, apparently. And for that, she got canned, erased, tossed out like day-old pastries no one wanted. When she finally made it home, she didn't even take off her shoes, just dropped her bag like it was poisoned and collapsed on the edge of the bed, trembling. Not from the cold, but from the rush of injustice boiling in her chest. That's it, she whispered out loud. That's how it ends. One good deed and I'm out. No warning, no second chances, just a corporate guillotine with a fake smile. She sat there for a long time, long enough for the adrenaline to give way to something quieter, numbness, that bitter kind of quiet where the world feels smaller than it was this morning. Then her phone buzzed. She ignored it at first, probably a notification from her bank reminding her how unemployed she now was, but it buzzed again, then again, and again, and again, a flood. She reached for it, wiping the screen dry with the corner of her sleeve. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all exploding. The comments didn't make sense at first. You're a hero. We need more people like you. If my kid was alone, I'd pray someone like you found her. What? She scrolled faster. Every platform, flooded, her name tagged, her photo posted. And then she saw it. A security cam video, grainy, low res, but clear as day. Joan, behind the counter. The girl, soaking wet, trembling. And Joan, sliding that cocoa across the counter with quiet kindness. No fanfare, no fuss. The caption, "Barista shows compassion to crying child. Gets fired for it." That was all it took. The internet moved like a wildfire dipped in gasoline. Tens of thousands of likes, hundreds of thousands of views, duets, stitches, reaction videos. Some cried, some raged. Most just couldn't believe it. Joan scrolled, stunned, barely breathing. The injustice she thought would bury her had just been broadcast to the world, and the world, it turned out, cared. Her DMs were a mess, strangers calling her brave, noble, decent. One woman wrote, "You reminded me that decency still exists. My son's autistic. I would have prayed for someone like you." And then, there it was, a private message. No profile picture, no flashy username, just text. "Joan, thank you for helping my daughter. Expect a call. With respect, Colonel Brady, Pentagon." She stared at it, read it again and again. Was this a joke? Some internet prank? A troll fishing for a reaction? Because this wasn't real. Baristas don't get messages from the Pentagon. But something in her gut told her this one was. The quiet cadence, the signature, the precision. It didn't feel made up. She set the phone down slowly. $7. 1 cup of cocoa. And now, the entire country was watching. This is the moment, and it's only just beginning. The climax is coming, and Joan's not staying quiet. Stick around. You'll want to see what happens when the Pentagon calls back. The next morning, Joan's phone buzzed to life before she even had a chance to pour herself a cup of coffee. Unknown number. She stared at the screen. Her first instinct? Ignore it. After all, yesterday had been a whirlwind of chaos, internet noise, and digital praise that felt surreal. Another spam caller? She wasn't in the mood, but something in her gut said, "Pick it up." She swiped. "Hello?" A pause. Then a voice, calm, deep, and unmistakably authoritative. "Is this Joan Madison?" Her posture straightened instinctively. "Yes. Who's calling?" "This is Colonel Brady, United States Army. I returned from an overseas assignment last night and was immediately briefed by my daughter." The room suddenly felt very still. "My daughter, Cassie, struggles with severe post-traumatic anxiety. An incident last year changed everything for her. She doesn't trust strangers. She shuts down in public. Panic attacks hit like a freight train. Yesterday, she had one in the middle of the city, surrounded by people who walked right past her." His voice tightened slightly, as just enough for Joan to hear the emotion buried beneath the military tone. "But you stopped. You saw her. You helped." Joan swallowed hard. She didn't know what to say. Her voice was small. I just couldn't leave her there, sir." "No, Miss Madison," the colonel replied with measured gravity. "You didn't just stop. You made her feel safe. You gave her warmth. You treated her like a human being when the world treated her like an inconvenience, and that matters more than you know." A lump formed in her throat. "I'm grateful, not just as her father, but as a man who spent decades watching people lose sight of what's important." Joan barely whispered, "Thank you." But Colonel Brady wasn't finished. "And for that," he continued, "I owe you something, a debt of sorts." Her brow furrowed. "Sir?" Turn on the news, Miss Madison. 5 minutes. I suggest Channel 4. He hung up. Joan stood frozen, phone still to her ear as the silence settled around her again. Was this really happening? Had the Pentagon just called her apartment? She didn't wait. She grabbed the remote with a shaking hand and flipped on the TV. The news anchor's voice came through immediately, as serious, poised, with that same tone networks use when something big is about to drop. This just in, a national story is sweeping headlines across the country after a barista in downtown Portland was reportedly fired for offering a free cocoa and sandwich to a distressed child. Surveillance footage confirmed the act of compassion, and now a growing public response is putting intense pressure on the coffee chain's parent company. But what's making this story explode even further is who the child was. Joan's breath caught. 13-year-old Cassie Brady, daughter of Colonel Marcus Brady, decorated officer and Pentagon advisor on mental health resilience in the armed forces. This morning, sources confirm the colonel is releasing a statement, commending the young barista and calling her actions a masterclass in quiet leadership and human decency. Joan dropped onto the couch. She wasn't just a girl who got fired anymore. She was the woman who stood up when no one else did, and now the whole world knew it. And this? This was just the beginning. Stay tuned. The part where corporate America starts squirming is next. Exactly 5 minutes later, just like he said, the news hit like a thunderclap. CNN breaking news, big red banner, dramatic music, anchors suddenly sitting straighter. The Pentagon condemns the firing of a barista who helped a distressed child in downtown Portland. The chain, Maple and Steam, is now under federal review. Sources confirm at least 3 major investors are pulling out. One location is already closed for internal investigation. Joan's heart punched against her ribs. She wasn't dreaming. This was real. They showed the security footage again, her sliding the cocoa to the girl, the same clip that had gone viral now replaying nationwide, this time with a Pentagon stamp behind it. In a world where stories vanish in a scroll, this one had stuck. The internet exploded. Barista Joan is a national hero. This is what courage looks like, not in a boardroom, but behind a counter. She lost her job and gained the nation's respect. Capitalism tried to fire empathy. It backfired. By noon, Joan's name was trending across every platform. Someone found her old college essay on kindness and posted a screenshot. Another user edited a photo of her face into a Rosie the Riveter poster. They weren't just supporting her, they were lifting her. Later that afternoon, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't unknown. It was national. The producers of the Trevor Grant Show, one of the biggest late-night talk shows in the country, wanted her live tonight. Joan almost declined. She wasn't a speaker. She was a barista, a student, a person who just didn't walk past a kid in trouble. But something in her knew. This moment wasn't just about her anymore. It was about all the people who'd ever been punished for doing the right thing. So she said yes. That night, under the glow of studio lights and national eyes, Joan sat on the edge of the iconic navy blue couch, opposite Trevor Grant, America's favorite blend of wit and truth. She wore a simple sweater, no makeup team, no stylist, just herself. Trevor leaned in, voice soft but firm. Joan, first of all, thank you. What you did, it hit all of us, especially those of us who've ever had to choose between rules and what's right. What made you step in? Joan's voice trembled for a second, but her spine stayed straight. I didn't do anything extraordinary, she said. A kid needed help. And the truth is, I'd rather lose a paycheck than my sense of who I am. The audience rose before she finished the sentence. A full standing ovation. Not polite, not performative, earned. Trevor nodded, eyes shining just a little. Well, Maple and Steam might have fired you, but the country just promoted you to a position far more important, the one who reminded us what integrity looks like. Joan looked down, shook her head gently with a modest smile. I didn't expect any of this. I just didn't want to be another person who walked by. And that was it. No grand speech, no rehearsed soundbite, just quiet truth, louder than any press release. This wasn't about coffee anymore. It was about character. And Joan, she just served the nation something a lot of us forgot we were thirsty for. Stick around. The real reckoning is just beginning. 1 week. That's all it took. 7 days ago, Joan was walking home under cold rain, clutching her dignity like it was the last thing they hadn't taken from her. Now, she was on billboards, posters, morning shows, the unexpected face of a growing movement. Heart over policy. The slogan was everywhere. It started with a few tweets, sure, a few TV spots, but what followed was bigger than anyone imagined. Teachers reposted her video writing, "This is what we mean when we talk about values." Veterans sent her letters, calling her an example of real courage under pressure. Parents told their kids her story at the dinner table. Students painted murals of her handing that cocoa to the little girl, and then the emails came. One in particular stood out, from a National Scholarship Foundation known for backing future leaders. "Joan, we've seen what you stand for. We'd be honored to support your education. Full tuition, any accredited university of your choice." Her hand trembled when she read it. No applications, no essays, no interviews, just recognition. Not of what degree she'd earned, but of the character she'd already proven. And so the world, ever quick to judge and quicker to forget, had done something rare. It remembered, and it elevated. She was no longer that girl who got fired from Maple and Steam. She was that Joan, the one who stood up, the one who gave a damn, the one who reminded a nation that compassion should never come with consequences. A week later, Joan stood on stage at a TEDx event. Nerves in her stomach, microphone clipped to her collar, and 1,000 people in the room hanging on her every word. She didn't speak like a professional. She didn't have a speechwriter. What she had was something more powerful: truth. She looked out across the crowd and said, steady and clear, "Sometimes being a good person is an act of rebellion. And if that's true, then I hope we raise a generation of rebels." The silence that followed was thick, not because no one agreed, but because everyone felt it. And then the crowd rose, loud, unified, emotional. She didn't blink, didn't cry. She just smiled, because Joan wasn't chasing applause. She was living proof that doing the right thing is always the right thing, even when it costs you everything. And now, that cost had turned into a legacy, and Joan was just getting started. Stick around. What happens when truth goes viral is more powerful than any scripted campaign. 2 months later, the sky above Washington, D.C. was calm, the kind of calm that feels earned. In a quiet corner of the city, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop, stood a new cafe. Nothing flashy, no influencer wall, no overcomplicated branding, just a glass door, the smell of fresh cinnamon rolls, and a sign in warm, handwritten script that made pedestrians pause mid-step. "We don't fire people for being kind." Inside, the place buzzed with a soft energy. Not chaotic, like a franchise. Not sterile, like a co-working lounge. This cafe had soul. Books on shelves, local art on the walls. Every drink was handwritten with care. Every employee treated like they mattered. Behind the counter, not Joan. She wasn't making lattes anymore. She owned the place. The journey from fired barista to cafe owner hadn't been a straight line. But it had been earned. Every dollar raised came from people who believed in her, who saw the video, heard her words, and thought, "That's the kind of world I want to live in." And then the bell jingled. Joan looked up from the register's open drawer, where she was triple-checking the books, the way all business owners do when it's their name on the lease. And her face softened. It was her, Cassie, the same girl who'd walked into her life under a stormy sky, broken and scared. Only now, Cassie stood straighter, brighter, a quiet confidence in her steps, like someone who knew the world wasn't always kind, but also knew there were still people in it who were. Joan stepped around the counter before Cassie could even speak. They hugged like old friends, no cameras, no press, just two souls who had shared a moment that changed everything. "You having another rough day?" Joan asked gently, half-smile playing on her lips. Cassie shook her head. "No, today's a good one," she said, eyes glinting. "I just came to say thank you. Again. My therapist says, you didn't just help me that day. You changed something inside me." Joan blinked back a rush of emotion. Well, she said, voice low but strong, you changed something in me, too. You and I, we proved something a lot of people forget, that kindness isn't weakness. It's a kind of strength the world can't always measure, but sure as hell can't ignore. Cassie nodded, eyes glassy, smile steady. The two stood in silence for a moment, letting it hang, not awkward, but sacred. A pause between past and future. Outside, a couple walked past and pointed to the sign on the window. One of them snapped a photo. The other just nodded and whispered, "Finally, a place that gets it." The sign read, "We don't fire people for being kind." And inside, behind that window, was living proof, Joan Madison. Not just the girl who made cocoa, not just the barista who got fired. She was the spark that reminded America, sometimes the quietest acts of compassion echo the loudest. And if you're wondering where hope lives, it might just be waiting behind a coffee counter, one cup at a time.